The F-86 shudders as it slices through thin air above Korea, not from enemy fire, from stress. Fuel needles sink faster than they should. The gun sight jitters. The jet vibrates like it's warning its pilot to stop. Ahead, a MiG climbs. Higher, faster, confident. By the book, this fight is already lost. The pilot ignores the book. He pulls anyway. The Sabre groans, the airframe protesting, and for one brief second the enemy fills the sight. Then it is gone. Because this jet is not supposed to be here, and this pilot knows it. The Sabre rolls to a stop on the runway, heat shimmering off the fuselage. Ground crew swarm it immediately. Not cheering, inspecting. A crew chief kneels beneath the wing, runs a hand along scorched metal, and shakes his head. This aircraft has issues. The pilot climbs out slowly, helmet still on, jaw clenched. He does not look like someone who just won a fight. He looks like someone who survived a mistake. Because this was not the jet he asked for. During the Korean War, pilots did not always get their aircraft. The F-86 Sabre was admired, but never blindly trusted. Pilots loved how it handled. They hated what it lacked. 6.50 caliber machine guns, accurate but slow to kill. Limited fuel. Every fight came with a clock. And at altitude, the MiG often had the advantage. This jet was not broken on paper. It was broken for the war it was being thrown into. In the ready room, other pilots joked about it. Some swore by the Sabre. Others muttered about chasing enemies uphill with half a fuel tank. This pilot said nothing. He had already learned the truth. If he flew the Sabre exactly as designed, it might keep him alive. If he trusted it too much, it would kill him before the enemy did, and tomorrow morning he would be back in the same cockpit. And that's the part history usually skips. It shows you silhouettes of jets and clean diagrams of tactics. It shows you arrows and altitude bands and neat conclusions. What it doesn't show you is the hesitation, the second guessing, the way a pilot's hand would hover on the throttle, unsure whether adding power would save him or kill him. Because in those years, jets were faster than understanding, faster than training, faster than instinct. Every sortie was a test flight. Every dogfight was an experiment conducted at the edge of human reaction time. Some pilots trusted their aircraft and paid for it. Others doubted everything and lived long enough to adapt. That's why the phrase broken jet doesn't mean damaged metal. It means unfinished ideas. Aircraft designed for one war, forced into another. Machines that could win fights, but only if you never asked them to do more than they were ready for. The pilots who survived Korea didn't become legends because they were fearless. They became legends because they were cautious when caution felt wrong. They learned when to disengage, when to climb instead of chase, when to let an enemy go because staying 1 second longer meant not coming home. By the time the war ended, jet combat finally made sense, not because technology had solved it, but because pilots had, and that knowledge didn't stay in Korea. It followed them into every sky that came after. The jets got better, the manuals got thicker, the margins got wider, but the lesson stayed the same. Never assume the machine is on your side. Never confuse performance with safety, and never forget that in the first jet war, survival wasn't about trusting your aircraft. It was about knowing exactly why you shouldn't. After Korea, the mythology starts to clean itself up. Photos get sharper. Stories get simpler. Jets get labeled as winners or losers. But the pilots who were there never talk that way. They remember sweating through flight gloves, staring at gauges instead of enemies. They remember flying home damaged, angry, and alive. They remember landing and sitting in the cockpit a few seconds longer than necessary, just to be sure the engine wouldn't quit at the last moment. Some of them went on to fly newer jets, faster ones, stronger ones, and every time they carried the same lesson with them. A jet doesn't care if you're an ace. It doesn't care how many kills you have. It only cares whether you respect its limits. In Korea, pilots learned that lesson the hard way, not from manuals, not from instructors, but from watching friends disappear in seconds because they trusted a machine more than they understood it. So when you hear about a pilot who took a broken jet into battle and came back alive, that's not a story about luck. It's a story about fear used correctly, about flying within the edge instead of past it, about knowing that the enemy in front of you is dangerous, but the jet you're sitting in might be just as deadly. That's the real legacy of the Korean War's jet aces, not how many enemies they shot down, but how they survived machines that were still learning how to fly. Years later, when pilots talked about Korea, they rarely bragged about kills first. They talked about fuel gauges dropping faster than expected, about controls stiffening at high speed, about the moment a jet stopped feeling like a machine and started feeling like a threat. They remembered how quiet the sky felt right before things went wrong, how fast everything happened once it did. The Korean War didn't produce perfect aircraft. It produced survivors who understood limits. Limits of metal, limits of training, limits of instinct. Those pilots went on to shape everything that followed. New doctrines, new training, new rules written in blood rather than theory. Never trust speed alone. Never assume the aircraft will forgive you. Never fight the jet you're flying, because the first jet aces didn't win by loving their machines. They won by respecting what those machines could do and fearing what they couldn't. And that's why the most honest jet ace of the war wasn't the one who praised his aircraft. It was the one who survived long enough to admit he never trusted it at all. And that's the contradiction at the heart of early jet warfare. The jets were faster than thought, stronger than expected, and far less forgiving than anyone admitted. Pilots entered the Korean sky believing technology would protect them, that speed would save them, that a better aircraft meant safer combat. What they learned instead was brutal. Jets didn't extend fights, they shortened them. They didn't give second chances, they erased them. Every engagement became a test not of courage, but of judgment. How long do you stay? How hard do you pull? When do you walk away? The ace who hated his jet understood something the manuals couldn't teach. You don't win jet fights by dominating the sky. You win by leaving it alive. So when history counts victories, it misses the real metric. The real success wasn't how many enemy jets he destroyed. It was how many times he came home in an aircraft he never fully trusted. Because in the first jet war, the most dangerous enemy was never the man in the other cockpit. It was believing your machine would save you when it couldn't. And the pilots who learned that lesson early are the reason we're still here to tell the story. Because in jet combat, confidence is easy. Survival is not. The pilots who died weren't reckless. They weren't stupid. They were trained exactly the way everyone else was. They trusted the aircraft. They trusted the climb. They trusted the manual. And when the jet reached its limits, it gave no warning, no shaking, no gradual loss, just a sudden reminder that physics does not negotiate. The ace understood that early. Every time he rolled into combat, he assumed something would go wrong. A gun would jam, fuel would run low, controls would stiffen at speed. So he flew like the jet was already broken. He never chased too long, never pulled for pride, never stayed just to prove a point. When the fight turned messy, he left. Other pilots called it caution. Some called it cowardice. Then they watched the scoreboard change. Enemy jets fell, not because he flew harder, but because he entered fights on his terms and exited before the jet could betray him. In the debriefs, his victories looked clean. Short engagements, few rounds fired, quick separations. What they didn't see were the fights he refused to finish. The shots he didn't take, the turns he didn't pull. That's how he survived flying a machine he didn't trust. And that's why the jet's reputation is misleading. It wasn't a flawless weapon. It was a sharp one. Sharp enough to kill the enemy. Sharp enough to cut its own pilot. The men who lived long enough to become aces weren't the ones who loved their jets. They were the ones who never forgot that the aircraft was always one mistake away from killing them first. After the war, the stories get cleaned up. Reports smooth the edges. Kill counts become headlines. Aircraft become legends. The jet is remembered as a masterpiece. The pilot isn't asked about the nights before missions, about checking the fuel twice, about flying home early while others stayed. No one asks how often he expected the engine to quit, or how many times he landed convinced the jet had spared him, not the other way around. In training rooms, young pilots study diagrams. They're told what the jet can do, what it was designed to do. They aren't told what it feels like when the nose goes soft at altitude, or when the controls answer just a little too late, or when your survival depends on doing less, not more. The pilot watches them and says nothing, because the lesson isn't in the manuals, it's in restraint, in distrust, in knowing that every aircraft is a compromise. The Sabre saved lives, and it took them. It rewarded discipline and punished pride. That's why the ace survived, not because he mastered the jet, but because he never stopped respecting the ways it could fail. And that's the part history forgets. The jet didn't make him deadly, fear did. The next mission comes sooner than expected. Same jet, same fuel limits, same quiet distrust. He notices small things now. The way the engine hesitates slightly during throttle changes, the way the jet trembles if he pulls too hard at speed. Warnings passed between pilots in half sentences. Careful above 30,000. Don't chase downhill. Never trust the fuel gauge. These aren't written anywhere. They're learned by watching who doesn't come back. Up high, the fight forms again. This time the MiGs are waiting, not diving recklessly, not rushing. They circle above, owning the altitude. The pilot feels the pressure build. If he climbs, he bleeds fuel and risks stalling. If he stays low, he gives them control. This is where the Sabre betrays him. Not through failure, through limitation. He climbs anyway. The jet feels wrong immediately. The nose gets soft. The response lags. He remembers the warning. Never fight the MiGs where it wants to fight. A MiGs drops in hard and fast. Cannon shells rip past him. He jerks the stick and the Sabre answers a fraction too late. The jet shudders violently. For a moment it feels like it might depart entirely. This is the moment pilots fear most. Not being shot, losing the airplane. He eases off, dives, and lets gravity do the work. Speed saves him again. Down low, the fight flips. Now the MiGs hesitates. Now it struggles to keep up. The pilot doesn't smile. He knows this window is brief. He lines up one careful pass, fires, misses, and leaves. No chase, no correction. He turns for home immediately. Later on the ground, someone counts his victories. 2, 3, 4. They call him an ace. He doesn't correct them. But privately he knows the truth. Every kill came with a warning. Every success carried a cost. The jet never stopped trying to kill him. It just failed each time. The longer the war goes on, the more pilots like him survive. Not because they love their aircraft, but because they fear it. They stop forcing turns, stop chasing pride, stop believing skill alone will save them. They fly within margins that feel cowardly, and they live. By the end of the war, his record is undeniable. Enemy aircraft destroyed, missions completed, reputation earned. But when asked about the Sabre, he never calls it perfect. He calls it honest. It tells you exactly when you were wrong, and if you ignore it, it kills you. That is the real story behind the numbers. A pilot who won not because his jet was flawless, but because he never trusted it enough to make a mistake. The mission begins like most of them did. Routine briefing. Weather acceptable. Enemy activity expected at altitude. Nothing unusual. The pilot straps in knowing that means nothing, because in this war nothing goes wrong slowly. The climb is long, fuel ticks away quietly. The jet feels smooth, almost polite. That's what makes it dangerous. Up high, the Sabre feels like it wants to help you. Responsive, stable, comfortable, and comfort is how pilots die. The call comes suddenly, MiGs. High. Above the formation, the pilot looks up and sees them first as dots, then as silver shapes dropping out of the sun. They do not come down together. They come one at a time, slashing attacks. The first pass misses him completely. The second rips through the formation. He resists the urge to turn. That instinct still fights him. Instead, he pushes the nose down slightly and builds speed. The jet responds instantly. Now the Sabre feels alive, fast, sharp. A MiG crosses his nose for half a second. That's all he gets. He squeezes the trigger. The guns chatter, not roar. A long burst. The MiG snaps away, trailing smoke. No celebration, no confirmation. He keeps flying. Because slowing down to watch is how jets die. Another MiG dives on him from above. This one stays longer. Too long. The pilot pulls to evade and immediately feels it. The jet stiffens. Controls grow heavy. This is the edge. One more pound of pressure, and the Sabre will punish him. He eases off. Barely. The MiG overshoots. The pilot rolls and dives instead of turning. The Sabre accelerates smoothly. This is where it shines. High speed. Clean lines. No hesitation. The MiG tries to follow and fails. Not because the pilot is better, because the MiG was never meant to live down here. For a moment, the pilot has position. He lines up carefully. Does not rush. Another long burst. This time the MiG breaks apart. The kill is clean and nearly fatal, because his fuel warning lights are already glowing. He had stayed too long. On the way home, the jet begins to feel different. Not wounded, empty. Every pilot knew this feeling. The quiet terror of watching the gauges sink while enemy territory stretches endlessly below. The jet that saved him now threatens to strand him. He lands with barely anything left. The wheels touch down hard. The engine coughs. When he climbs out, he does not pat the aircraft. He stares at it. Angry, grateful, uneasy. He has scored again. But the jet did not make it easy. And the war is teaching him a lesson he cannot ignore. This machine will let you win, but only if you obey its limits, and next time those limits will be tested even harder. He had been warned about this jet long before he ever fought in it. The warnings did not come from manuals. They came from instructors. Do not pull too hard at high speed. Do not chase upward for too long. Do not stay in the fight once your fuel drops past a certain point. And above all, do not try to fly it like a propeller fighter. Those rules sounded simple. They were not. Most of the men training him had survived World War II. They had won by turning tighter, by staying close, by grinding the enemy down until someone made a mistake. Those instincts were carved deep. Late 1940s jet training did not erase them. It reused them. Jets were explained as fighters, just faster. Same logic, same reactions, same confidence. Only now, every decision happened twice as fast. In a propeller fighter, you could make a bad move and feel it coming. The aircraft would warn you, shudder, bleed speed, give you time to correct. In a jet, mistakes arrived finished. Speed erased reaction time. Altitude erased forgiveness, and fuel erased bravery. The pilot learned this the hard way. His first encounters were not dogfights. They were flashes. A MiG would appear high above him, dive once, fire, then climb away before he could even turn properly. No circling, no chasing, just a single violent pass. Every instinct screamed at him to follow. Every lesson said, do not. The MiG climbed better, higher ceiling, stronger acceleration upward. If he chased, he would burn fuel. He could not replace. If he pulled too hard, the jet would punish him. If he slowed down, he would die. This was not a duel. It was an argument over position, and the MiG kept choosing when the argument started and when it ended. The pilot began to understand why so many Sabre pilots complained. Not because the jet was bad, but because it demanded restraint. It flew beautifully when treated gently. It became lethal when pushed too far. The machine guns did not help. 6 guns meant accuracy mattered. You had to track. You had to stay lined up. The MiG did not. Its cannons were meant for moments. A burst, a tear, then gone. The pilot survived by refusing to play the old game. He stopped turning, stopped chasing, stopped trying to finish fights. Instead, he waited. He kept his speed. He protected his altitude. He left fights unfinished. If the angle was wrong, other pilots called it cautious. He called it staying alive, because every time he ignored the rules of the jet, it reminded him who was really in control. And the next mission would test that balance harder than ever.